There's a lot of running. And my book focuses mostly on the 80s, but there's a lot of 70s in there. The origin of all those guys is the 70s. They were all running in high school and college in the 70s.
Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're in Maryland with the author of a brand new book, a sports writer who was born in the 70s and did some running and has written extensively on the legend and super success story behind Hagerstown and its running in the 80s and 90s. But there's plenty in his book about running in the 70s. We're going to talk about all that today. Welcome on the podcast, Andy Mason.
Hey, happy to be here. Thank you.
Andy, let's get your personal background. Where were you born and what was your life in the 70s as a young kid in terms of you getting into growing up kids playing sports?
I was born in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania in 1972. Probably by 77 or 78, I was on my first Little League baseball team, and baseball was my first love. I played baseball probably first grade through seventh grade. Then I got into running. Then I joined the track team at my junior high school, and that became my spring sport instead of baseball.
What was that like in terms of the facilities and the kind of position of track and field in the school hierarchy of sports? Pennsylvania is a football, basketball.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, in Chambersburg, there was a rich running culture. There were a lot of good runners, and we had huge teams. And the whole reason I joined, it wasn't because I thought I was going to be a great runner, and I never really became a great runner. I got better, but I joined because my friends were joining. And my father, in the early, in that period, a few years before I joined the track team, he himself started running, and that was more about just for health reasons, just to get in shape, lose a little weight, get in shape. And then he started going to races, and I would tag along, maybe run the mile fun run. When I got a little older, I'd do a 5K or 10K, and then I joined the track team. I fell in love with the sport.
Were you paying attention to the sport on the bigger scene with the Olympics and that?
Oh, yeah. When I got into it, I got way into it. When my dad started running, all of a sudden we were getting Runner's World magazine every month. I ate that up. As a boy, when I got into baseball, I loved the newspaper every day. We had an afternoon paper, and it was the only way you knew what happened. You got all the West Coast box scores. First thing I did every day when I got home from school, got the newspaper and went to the box scores to see what happened, all the baseball games. And that sort of same passion trickled over to running, especially Running Times magazine. I would crack that thing open. That's the only way you knew what happened at the races. And every race of any consequence was in that magazine. I studied the results. I memorized the names, and those guys were just like baseball stars to me.
Yeah.
And one of them then was in our town, Steve Spence. So it was a real rush to see, here's a guy living in Chambersburg who's finishing near the top or at the top of significant races.
Yeah. He's lost his streak of 5-minute miles. When he didn't make a 5-minute mile at, I don't remember what age he did, he said, okay, now I got a streak of 5:17 miles. About 50 years. An amazing athlete. Yeah.
Oh, remarkable guy. And I just recently saw him. My son went to his cross country camp. And when I dropped my son off, I talked to him for a while, and he still looks like, I don't think he's gained a pound, still looks super fit.
This sounds like a obvious early breeding ground to become a sports journalist. What kind of student were you?
I was a good student. I was a very good student in high school. In college, I went to College of William & Mary in Virginia, and it was competitive. I joined a fraternity, and school I sort of fell into the path of least resistance. I still wanted to get good grades, but I didn't know what I wanted to do after school. I wasn't academically driven, although I wanted to do well. And I majored in sociology. And after I graduated, I had a few different jobs until I sort of one day, it was like an epiphany. I just was like, what do I want to do? I want to, decided I want to be a sports writer. And I did what I had to do to make that happen. I got a job freelancing at our local paper. And after a few months of that, a full-time job came open in a neighboring town. I took that and I went to another paper. And after a few years, I ended up at the Herald Mail in Hagerstown, Maryland. I worked there for 23 years, just recently left that job. Pretty much the day after I left that job in September, just this past year, I started writing this book.
What were you doing in terms of your sports and running while at William and Mary?
At William and Mary, I played lots of intramural sports. Maybe I could have run on the cross country team. I don't know, but they were really good. I would have had zero chance of ever making the varsity. They were really good when I was there. Paul Vandegrift, Brian Hyde, Steve Swift, Kevin Krause. There were a lot of really good teams there, runners and good teams while I was there. So I didn't do that, but I had a 4-mile loop and I had a 4.5-mile loop. And pretty much every single day, late afternoon, I ran one of those loops, just, stay in shape.
Yeah.
Probably ran, 6:37 minute pace for all of them. And I did a few 5Ks here and there, but I wasn't driven to be in great shape or race or run. I was mostly just running. I enjoyed running and, it's sort of an outlet at the end of the day.
What about your reading of Runner's World and Running Times? Did that fall off in college or were you still a fan?
Yeah, it did, because I wasn't at home to get them. The magazines were still coming to my house back in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, but I wasn't getting them. But I became friends with some runners on the team and I went to a lot of meets. The William and Mary cross country course was a few miles off campus and I'd ride my bike out there. And there were some really competitive meets. I remember being surprised at how few people were there. I think I was probably one of the few students who got on their bike and rode to watch that meet. William and Mary also hosted the Colonial Relays every spring, and I greatly enjoyed watching that.
Let's talk about the long scope of your running before we talk about the process of writing the book and what it's about. You ended up with 13 Bostons, several of the JFKs yourself. And so you're going from a high school kid on the team to, I'm not quite good enough to make college varsity, to becoming an ultra runner.
Yeah, I graduated from college in '94, had a few different jobs. I always ran here and there, but at some point my running got down to maybe like 2 miles a couple times a week, or 2 miles every 2 weeks. I just sort of got out of it and I gained some weight. And I can tell you, I was back in Chambersburg in the late 90s, probably at my heaviest weight. Honestly, I was probably close to 200 pounds. And I remember being out for maybe a 2-mile jog one day, and I was running by the Chambersburg YMCA at the exact same time the Chambersburg half marathon was finishing right in front of the YMCA. And I thought to myself, man, that'd be awesome to be fit enough to compete in that. That sort of sparked it. And 1 year later, I ran the Chambersburg half marathon.
Wow.
And if I can remember my time, I think it was like 1:33. And that was March of 99. Then by November of 99, I ran my first marathon at Harrisburg Marathon 99. At the time, I was going to be one and done. Just wanted the bucket list event. Just wanted to say I'd run a marathon. It hurt like hell. I finished in 3 hours and 14 minutes. When I finished, not only was I never running another marathon, I was never running again. But a couple of days later, I was like, at the time, qualifying for Boston was 3 hours and 10 minutes for my age. I guess I was the open male, 18 to 34. And I was like, I was only 4 minutes off. And I was on pace to run under 3:10 for most of it. I fell apart at the end. So 1 year later, I went back to Harrisburg 2000 and ran 3 hours and 4 minutes, qualified for Boston. And then I ran Boston in 2001, because back in 2001, Boston was a big competitive race, but you could still sign up pretty close to race day. So I ran that, and I think I ran 3:02, so it's another PR. Then it became the race to break 3 hours. In 2004, back at the Harrisburg Marathon, I finally broke 3 hours, ran 2 hours and 57 minutes. Then a guy in town here who you've interviewed on this podcast, Mike Spindler, who's also race director of the JFK 50 mile. I started training with his group, started doing some speed workouts, and pretty soon I was down in the 240s.
That's nice.
I ran a bunch of marathons in the 240s, but that was, never broke 240. I always thought I could break 240, but I never did. Then I started getting into the JFK, and those were probably my most successful races. I placed 9th in 2007 and 10th in 2008. And top 10, you get, there's an award ceremony for the top 10. Top 10 get trophies. Of all the age group trophies I've ever had, most of them have been recycled for other races, but I've kept those two. I still have those two.
Yeah, JFK. The JFK at the beginning had intermediate awards too. You get a certificate if you made 15 miles, you get a medal. You didn't have to finish to get some of these milestones.
Yeah, that was back in the 70s. That was when Buzz Sawyer, the founder of the race, was the race director. And Mike Spindler took over as race director in 1993. So when I first ran JFK, which was 2003, the whole game had changed from the old days. There used to be no aid stations. There were 14 aid stations. And you got a medal if you finished. There were no intermediate. If you didn't finish, you got nothing.
Yeah.
So the days of there was no checkpoints along the way or intermediate.
In 1971, no aid stations. I don't even think there were intermediate timing signals. You wore a watch or you didn't know. What was your mileage like before you got with Mike Spindler's group training and you were training for marathons? How'd you figure out your training regimen and distance?
I just sort of pieced it together. I can tell you, I would run 4 to 6 miles every day. And then one day a week, I'd do a double-digit run. If I wasn't training for a marathon, it'd be 10 miles. And then if I was training for a marathon, I'd just into the teens once a week. That was pretty much it. When I started training with Mike Spindler, I started doing speed work. He has a group that does like an adult group of runners that he coaches that do Wednesday morning speed work. And when I started doing those, everything changed. Once you commit to doing speed work, it just sort of trickles over to everything else. I start doing more mileage. I was never doing crazy mileage. My sweet spot was like 65 miles a week. When I was doing 65 miles a week, I really felt like I could be doing more. So I get into 80 miles a week, I start getting tired, and 65 was my sweet spot.
Yeah, you and Sebastian Coe.
Yeah. I would hit the 70s a number of times, but I really felt like 65. I always loved it when I felt like I could be doing a lot more because that means you're feeling, strong, fit.
When you got out of college, were you on that path to becoming a sports writer? Was that in, and what was it like trying to get a job when you graduated?
I got to tell you, I was directionless after. I went to a pretty competitive school. People were graduating, getting all sorts of great jobs, and I don't know where my head was. My first job out of college was waiting tables at Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. A friend he went to a different school, one of my high school friends, he had just graduated from Franklin and Marshall in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and he and I spent the summer in Hilton Head. Then I moved to Atlanta, got another job waiting tables. Then I got a job as a counselor at an outdoor camp for troubled kids. Then I ended up moving back to Pennsylvania, and for 2 years I worked as a manager for a rock band. A band called the Dirges. That was a lot of fun. I was sort of their manager, tour manager. We were on the road for 2 years. We were basically on the road, first based out of State College, Pennsylvania for a year, and then Philadelphia. Then that ended. I got a job working as a financial consultant at Merrill Lynch. I did that for a year. You
really had no map.
Yeah, it wasn't for me. And then I got a temp job at a water treatment company, and I did that for a while. And then it just came to me, what would I like to do? I love sports. I loved writing. I love newspapers. So I want to be a sports writer. So I got a job freelancing at the local Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. I was back home in Chambersburg then. The Public Opinion, got some freelance work with them and another paper called the Shippensburg News Chronicle. Did that for a few months, and then a full-time job came open in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania at the Record Herald in sports. I got that job, did it for about 2 years. Then I went to a larger paper in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, was there only about a year, and then the job came open in Hagerstown at the Herald Mail. I applied for it. It was a bigger, at the time, it was like 40,000 daily circulation, sort of a mid-major, and came to Hagerstown, thought I'd be here for a couple years and, moved, try to go to a metro, and I got really comfortable in Hagerstown, got married, bought a house, had kids, and ended up working at the Hagerstown Herald Mail for 23 years.
Your personal psyche about being an athlete, being competitor, and then becoming either, when you started sports writing, were you a storyteller? Were you a data hound? How did that all fit together?
Early on, it was mostly just game coverage. occasional feature stories here. It's high school sports. That's what people want to read about. So I would, every high school sport there you can think of, and, I would cover. Early on, that was the bulk of what I did, was just game coverage of high school sports with feature stories here and there on the, athletes or coaches. I can tell you how I got into the JFK was I moved to Hagerstown, and I was here just a few months, and the sports center at the time asked me if I wanted to go cover the JFK, and I didn't know much about it. At that point, I'd run a handful of marathons, including Boston twice, and I didn't know anything about ultra marathons, but I thought, at the end of every marathon I ran, I couldn't imagine running 10 more feet. How are these people going to go double? I couldn't even comprehend it. Then I went and watched it and covered it. I was like, wow, this is something. And I realized, just like your regular road marathon, maybe outside Boston, they come in all shapes and sizes. It's like regular people doing something extraordinary. And that was 2000, that was fall, November 2002. I covered it, witnessed it. And the next year I ran it. And I just I fell in love with JFK.
Yeah.
I did it between 2003 and 2009. I did it 5 times. My first JFK, I did it in 8 hours. I think 8 hours, around 8 hours and 20 minutes. And then the others were all under 7 hours. Like, I took it real seriously.
Yeah, those are good times. Those are times that may some years have won it. Yeah, if you'd have just been born earlier.
Yeah. Well, now I got my best time is 6 hours and 34 minutes, and that might get you 30th place now. And it's gotten really competitive. It's still a good time, but the race has gotten really competitive. You need to run under 5.5 hours to have any chance of winning it now.
What about your skills then as a journalist and a storyteller that led to, this is your first book?
It is my first book. And I've always liked telling stories. I think as a writer, I was always maybe more of a reporter than a storyteller. This was like real storytelling for my book. A feature story here and there, you tell a story, but it's short. And this like really allowed me to, it was a different kind of writing. And I greatly enjoyed it.
You've gone through the personal experience of the discipline of daily running, training for a race, preparing for a race, going through a race, and all that. Is that the kind of stuff that contributes to your ability to put your head down? I know you wrote this book in a short, intense period. Is that, are you an obsessive person? Is there how'd that happen?
I just got into it. I am a bit obsessive. But people are like, but it wasn't that hard. I accepted a buyout from the Herald Mail from work in early September. They basically were going to continue paying me for X amount of months. So I sort of felt like I still had a job. I was still getting paid, still had a job to do. And I also felt sort of a time crunch, though. I wanted to get this book out, and it's not a super long book. It's only 30,000 words. Which is like 155 pages. But I became obsessed with it. It's just what I did every day, and I loved it because I love there's a lot of stats in there. There are a lot of little stories. It's a story I felt it ties together a bunch of stories. But it's the same story, and it's something I really felt needed a permanent record. When I came to Hagerstown in 2002, this era that I'm writing about was over. All that was left were the stories. And I've heard them over and over the years. And I just sort of felt like, they're great stories. And I wanted to, like I said, give them some permanency. And it's sort of forgotten. I didn't want it to be forgotten. It was really something extraordinary that happened in a small town.
It was mainly the 80s and 90s was the heyday of the explosion and key success. But there are chapters that opened Marine Corps Marathon in 87. Then we jump back to that JFK in 1971 when a young teen, Mike Spindler, manages to get across the finish line before thing. How did the idea for this book come about to you?
It's something I've thought about. The idea of writing this had come to me a few times, but I've got kids, family, and a job. I was not going to be able to write a book just here and there. You need to go all in and commit to it and make it. For me, I just had to make it my full-time job. I can tell you, I was offered this buyout in late July. And I basically had a few days to decide whether I wanted to take it. And I was on the fence. I was mowing the lawn. And while I was mowing the lawn, it was a Saturday afternoon. I was like, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to take the buyout and write this book. It just sort of came to me. And that's what I did.
How'd you get the title?
Hagerstown versus the world, sort of small town versus everyone. These were guys and gals who were competing at the very highest level. It wasn't just like a club group that was training to win the local races or qualify for Boston. They had Olympic aspirations. They were going to the Olympic trials. They were going to world championships, national championships. They were competing at the highest level at the biggest road races in America. That's where I got the title. And in the verses, there was some defiance there, and there's some grit, and there's a lot of friendship. So Hagerstown versus the world, it just sort of came to me.
Let's talk about a couple people that were there at the beginning. Who were the couple key people who started what it would become by 1980 and then on? Or who were the key players at the beginning?
Well, a key player was Buzz Sawyer. Buzz Sawyer was a world-class runner. He was an NCAA All-American at NC State in the 50s. He was one of the first Americans to ever break 9 minutes for 2 miles on the track. He moved to Hagerstown in 1960, and at the time was an Olympic hopeful at 10,000 meters. He came to Hagerstown, and he got injured almost right away. Slipped on ice, suffered a broken bone. And while he was sidelined, he decided he wanted to start coaching. He founded the Cumberland Valley Athletic Club, and he started coaching some of the region's best high school runners. Back then, there was outdoor track and spring cross country in the fall. In the summer and winter months, they would come to Buzz and he would train them. And he had a real organized group, structured training plans, races. Then he founded the JFK. He answered John F. Kennedy's call for Americans to improve their physical fitness in 1963, stitched together this 50-mile route, had he and 10 boys from his club. 4 of them finished, including Buzz. And then, make a long story short, it became an annual event. So he sort of started it. And, guys who were under his wing became coaches. But my story sort of started, the first big name was Terry Baker. Terry Baker started running in the 70s at Williamsport High School, won multiple state titles. And here's a kid, he came from nothing. Very humble beginnings, no electricity, no running water. And I talk about that in the book. And he just sort of fell into running and realized he was pretty good at it, So here's a kid who came from nothing. He wasn't a good student. He tries running. Man, I'm pretty good at this. And then that became his thing. And he was really good. He became a national champion. He stayed local. He went to Hagerstown Junior College, won a couple junior college national titles. Then he went to Auburn, and then he became one of the best road racers in America. After Auburn, he came back to Hagerstown, and he fell in with Greg Schenk. Greg Schenk was a fascinating guy. Greg Schenk ran cross country in high school in the 60s at Williamsport High School, which Williamsport's right outside Hagerstown. You can almost call Williamsport Hagerstown. It's a neighboring town. But running wasn't his passion. But he ran cross country. He wasn't a star. He liked mainstream sports. He played in the adult leagues, basketball and flag football here. And then he decided he wanted to start running to improve his fitness. And he started running, got into it. He never went to college, but he worked as an engineer at Mack Trucks. He's a very bright guy. And one of his coworkers is Buzz Sawyer. And they ate lunch together every day. Greg would pick his brain, and Terry Baker comes back to town. He needs some direction. Terry was as gifted as anyone, loved running, but he needed a coach. He needed someone to point him in the right direction, tell him what he should be doing. He started running with Greg Schenk, and Greg Schenk started giving him some guidance. And that's the origin of this book.
Yeah, all 3 of those guys do kind of fit this Hagerstown versus the world personal model in their lives too.
Yes, and then Mike Spindler moved to Hagerstown the summer before his junior year in high school. He starts running, and the local star at the junior college is Terry Baker. If you're a young kid in Hagerstown and who's into running, you have this junior college national champion in town, with shaggy hair and a mustache. He was like Prefontaine, he was like a rock star to these kids. So What did Spindler want to do? He wanted to run at Hagerstown Junior College as well, which he did. And then he started running with Terry Baker in the summers. And pretty soon he's, being coached by Greg Schenk. And then there are other runners in the area who sort of started running with them, like Jeff Scuffins. And Chris Fox grew up down the road in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Terry Baker's a few years older, but he grew up worshiping Terry Baker because he was the closest thing the area had to a running star. And Chris Fox ends up in Hagerstown being coached by Greg Schenk. And Chris Fox is, superstar.
Yeah, and you've got some other champions. A Pennsylvania runner, you talked, Brian Ferrari ends up in Hagerstown after graduating.
Yeah, so Brian Ferrari came right in the heyday. So Brian Ferrari, three-time NCAA Division II national champion. It's the late 80s. He's been out of college a few years. He gets his master's in teaching, and he's in Western PA. He's looking for a teaching job at a school where there's an elite training scene. He doesn't apply to schools in, Oregon or Colorado or New Mexico. He wants to come to Hagerstown to be part of that group, and he does. So pretty soon he's here, and he's, Greg Schenk is his coach.
Apart from the running, then, what happened in Hagerstown over those, say, 3 decades, 70s, 80s, and 90s? How was Hagerstown changing?
The factories were shutting down, there was some strain in the city. It wasn't, it was the Rust Belt. I guess the thing about Hagerstown is right outside the city, you have incredible training grounds. You have the mountains, and you have the C&O Canal Tow. It's 184 miles from Cumberland, Maryland to Georgetown in DC, and it's just the greatest place in the world to train. And it goes right through Williamsport, Maryland, right outside Hagerstown, and that was sort of the epicenter of it all.
I ran on that when I was in DC for a year, and yeah, it's a great connector. Let's talk about the writing process of going from day one when you said, okay, I'm on this full time. What was your day like writing and researching?
The first thing I need to do is knock out some interviews. My first night, the first thing I did to get started was I went to Mike and Maria Spindler's house, and they're both main characters in this book. We talked about Mike. The book opens with him running the JFK for the first time as a 12-year-old, and he went on to become a 2-time champion of the event and a course record holder before he became the race director. But he also married Maria Pazarentzos, another, like Ferrari. She came to Hagerstown from Ohio because of the running. She came here to train under Greg Schenk in 1985. They then get married. So anyway, years later, I go to their house. I spend hours there. I record everything. And then it's just a matter of I'm listening to our interview and fact checking everything, making notes. And then I just started collecting interviews from everyone involved. And just from being here 20 plus years, I knew everyone, some better than others. But the next thing I needed to do, I needed Chris Fox's blessing, because Chris Fox had pretty much been gone from Hagerstown. He was leaving when I got here. I knew him, know him, but we weren't really close. So I drove down to the Charlottesville, Virginia area, a couple hours from Hagerstown, spent an entire afternoon in a coffee shop talking with him. I recorded our conversation. He was on board. That was early in week 2 of this. And I drove home from that interview. I was like, I got it. I got it. This is going to happen. I like where this is going. I've got Chris Fox's blessing. He gave me a lot of good stuff. And then it was just repeating the process with everyone involved. Terry Baker, Brian Ferrari, Earl Stoner, and other community members, other coaches, a lot of interviews. I'm not going to give it up. Some of the guys, some of the main characters in the book are no longer with us. So I'm unfortunately unable to interview them. I read countless newspaper articles, dug up countless articles, countless race results, and just sort of tied it. I think when I told people I was going to write this book, they thought it was going to be like an encyclopedia entry, like, here's Chris Fox and all of his career highlights. I wanted it to be a story, and I tried to tell it as a story. And
well, you've got some basically native Hagerstown people and a lot of imports. What's the quintessential Hagerstown person of the decade? What made them tick, click, or connect?
I have a list of 10 people who trained in Hagerstown, and 10 people who were in that group and that, the era I wrote about that competed at the Olympic trials. 10 different people competed at the Olympic trials. A few of them competed in multiple Olympic trials. One of them was an Olympian. But the heartbeat of it all actually might be Mike Spindler, who never qualified for the trials. His passion carried over. And there's Greg Shank as well. He was the coach. Greg Shank was the glue, but Mike brought a lot of passion. I'd say Greg Shank and Mike Spindler sort of the heartbeat of it all.
What were you doing as a sports writer in those last 20 years? How did your career evolve over that from the beginning? Did that change?
Well, I can tell you at a paper like at our paper, I mean, high school sports are, the nuts and bolts, and, it's what separates you. Why should we read your paper instead of the Washington Post? You go to the local convenience store, you can get the Baltimore Sun, the Washington Post, whatever. Why do I want to get the Herald Mail? It's because it's the local stuff. Everyone's going to have the same wire stories about the same pro teams. But if you want to find out what happened here, you got to hit the local colleges and especially the high schools. People want to read about what the high school kids are doing. So the high school sports was essentially the core of what we did in various ways, whether game coverage, features, stat packages, all-star teams, all counties, all that stuff. But my role changed. We had an 11-person sports team when I started, I think, between part-timers and full-timers. I came as just a reporter and then pretty soon became assistant sports editor. And then I became sports editor. The last several years, about almost half my career was probably a sports editor. That actually involved a lot less writing. I was sort of just doing the organizing, the editing, and I missed the writing. I still did a little, but not nearly as much.
Were you still out at the meets talking to high school kids?
Yeah, so I still kept my beats. So I kept some beats. What's funny is sports that I love to cover, the running, cross country, track. I also really like covering wrestling. For most sports writers, that's, you're drawing the short straw. Most sports writers would rather be at a football game than a cross country meet. Rather cover a baseball game than a track meet. I was the opposite. When I could, I would cover the running events, and the other guys were more than happy to let me have them.
Yeah. You were kind of well known. You knew everybody in the community, but did the kids know you were a runner? What was going on with you personally?
Yeah, I think a lot of them did. I mean, during my heyday, I would go to local 5Ks and compete with the top high school kids that I was, reporting on. So yeah, they knew who I was.
That's great. What about the end of this? Did you know how long it was going to take you when you started in September? What was your timeline?
No, I gave myself a 6-month timeline. It's like, I thought I could knock it all out in 6 months. Like I knew it wasn't going to be a super long book, and it's not, but I can do it. I mean, I knew I could do it because it's all I was doing. And it's not, I think some people, it takes them years to write a book. Well, they've got another job, and some days they might not do anything with it, or they might only write 100 words and they might not get back to it for a few days. I knew I could do it in 6 months because that's all I was doing. That's all I was doing. And I knocked it out. I wrote it in 3 months. I started in early September. I finished in early December. I didn't even think about, when I was writing it, I wasn't worried about any of the other parts about publishing, putting it together. I just wanted to get the story done first. And then I let 6 people read it, got some feedback from no one else. I had no editor. No one touched this manuscript but me. But I let 6 people read it. I got feedback from all of them.
All runners?
Yeah, they were all runners. 2 of the main characters in the book read it. My wife, who's also a runner, read it. My father used to be a runner, read it. And then 2 other runner friends, guys that also know writing. A guy I used to work with at the paper, read it. And a college friend of mine that knows running and writing, read it. And I got feedback from all of them, and that led to some editing. And then I read it probably at least 19 times. And that, each time I go through, I want to change how that sentence is, or I can make that look a little sharper. My wife read it. Hey, this doesn't quite make sense to me. Oh yeah, you're right. I can sharpen that up. And that was my editing process. And then I had to collect photos and get permission to use all the photos. And then I hired a designer to put together, to do the layout and the cover, a woman named Laura Oates, who just did a fantastic job. I love the cover, love the layout. She did a great job. And basically, as soon as she got it done, I hit the publish button on Amazon, uploaded it and hit publish. And the next day, I'm the #1 new running release on Amazon. And that was a rush.
Yeah, congratulations. Talk about the cover picture you picked.
I'll show it to you. It's right here.
Yeah.
Jeff Scuffen's on the cover. Got Terry Baker on the back. Yeah. I'm very pleased with how it came out. And the feedback I've gotten has been great. A lot of people, like I said, it's a short book. Most people are telling me they can't put it down. They're reading it. And they sit down for, 3 hours. They're just sitting down at, 1 p.m. on a Sunday. And, by dinner time, it's done. They're emailing me, great book. I had a family member who bought the book because she's my family member. And she started reading it, I think, thinking this, she knows nothing about Hagerstown or the running scene here or any of these people, and she couldn't put it down either.
Yeah, it's a gem, this story that is not going to be well known widely. And then there'll be some things people say, oh, yeah, I heard of that. I know that was going on, just didn't put it all together. You spent a career in writing and then as an editor doing less. But a lot of people's first book, they got to get their autobiography out of their system. You kind of dodged that by writing a nonfiction, but not autobiographical.
Right. Yeah. If I were to write a memoir, there might be, for it to be really interesting, some people might be offended by what was in it.
Okay. Well, it might be as good a seller.
Yeah.
What did you hope to accomplish apart from preserving it? How did you want people to feel, or what did you want them to realize more detailed than just I'm preserving the story?
I'll be honest with you. I'm sort of living in this fantasy land. I want to write a cult classic. I might not do it, but that was my goal. Like I want to write a book that's a success, a book that I would want to read. And I got to tell you, I love reading running books. I've never wanted to read a book like how to improve your 5K time, or anything, run a faster marathon if you do this. All the how-to and I have no interest. I like reading, the running stories. Like I love, for example, Running with the Buffaloes by Chris Lear, great book. And Once a Runner, fiction. Love the stories, and that's sort of what I wanted to bring a story, tell this story because it's a great story. And because it's running, if this were another sport, it would be like, imagine you had, a dozen MLB all-star players that all came from one town in a short period of time. Everyone would know about it. But because it's running, it's not everyone outside of running can, tie, piece that or tie it together. And that's sort of what I wanted to do. Hey, look what happened here.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, you yourself were a kid growing up, sports was important. You're a running fan and a runner for a long time. And then just twist of fate, you end up in Hagerstown.
Yeah.
And a couple decades later, you've got this amazing find that you lived through for decades and it percolated into this. It's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a real rush. My book was released 1 week, 8 days ago. So far, it's been a great success. I don't know how long that can last. Hopefully for a while. And I'm on cloud nine. Just yesterday, I have 2 sons. My youngest son is a senior in high school, Hagerstown kid, North Hagerstown High School. He won the state title in the 3,200 meters indoors, and that life doesn't get any better.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah,
and you're not a dad coach, huh?
My son's name's Walker. Walker Mason, Walker the runner. Walker, just with my wife and I, he grew up in a running family and we dragged him around. He was dragged around to the races. So as a very young boy, he's doing the mile fun run, or the kids run at these races. By the time he's 9, he's running the 5Ks and having age group success. It's like, oh, this kid, he's got some talent, and he fell in love with it. He's all in. And through that, I've done a lot of coaching. I can't run with him anymore, but back when he was, 11, like ages 11 to 13, I'd be his pacer at races. And he wasn't doing a lot of running, but
where's he going next?
Don't know yet. Don't know. I have a good idea, but he hasn't announced it yet. So I'm not entirely sure. We're not sure.
What's next? What's next for you writing? And what's next for you career now that you put this down? And
oh man,
you're in the euphoria stage now. But
yeah, so that's a good question. I had more fun writing this book than any work project, anything I've ever done. It was the most, I really liked the storytelling, the stats, everything about it. I would love to do another book. And I think I would, I'm going to start picking up some freelance writing work. I'm going to start doing that very soon. But I would really like to write another book. What it's going to be about, I'm not entirely sure yet, but I needed this to come out first, let it breathe. I didn't know if I thought it was good. I needed other people to tell me, if I'm going to write another book, this has to be some kind of success. So I think it's going to be, 1 weekend, it's been a success. So we'll, justify working on another one.
Yeah, Amazon also provides the ebook thing. Is that something you can do with this one?
Yeah, there will be an ebook probably within a couple weeks.
Okay. So people can Kindle that.
Yeah.
And what'd you do after you pushed the button? I mean, what's it like? I mean, like compare it to being on the starting line or thinking you're going to, I want to be top 10 here. Compared to.
Oh, it was. So what happens is with Amazon, you push the button, you upload all your stuff and you press the button, publish. And then you're told it'll be live within 72 hours. So it's like, is it going to happen now? Yeah. I kept refreshing the computer is it live? Is it live? Is it live? And then about 48 hours later, it went live. Very shortly after it went live, I just posted it on Facebook. Here it is. Out today, Hagerstown versus the World. Put a link available on Amazon, put a link to Amazon, and then included a photo of the cover of the book.
Yeah, and Mike Spindler's telling everybody he's very happy with it. I know.
That's the most important thing that the people who are the characters of the book like, and so far all of them have told me it's great.
Yeah, I've done the process with the mother-in-law, wrote a romance novel and put it on a the technical process of publishing a book on Amazon. And it's a bit of doing it yourself. Congratulations. It's a bit
thank you.
It's a bit of a climb to get through exactly how to do everything. And that's very good.
With a quarter century of newspaper experience, I sort of knew very confident, but things I was very confident that I got 99% of the facts right. There's always room for, maybe because you can fact check nearly everything, but not everything. Sometimes you just have to take people's word that something happened and maybe someone else knows differently. And so far, no one said, I've gotten zero negative feedback, which I was worried about that. And then there's just like sort of exposing, working in a newspaper, I'm used to you writing a story under deadline and bam, it's in print for thousands of people the next day. So I was used to that, but this is a little different. It was a bigger project. A newspaper story, there are some stories I wrote in 40 minutes just because of a game ends and you got 40 minutes to write, to get in the next day's paper. But this was such a big project. So I was nervous. So yeah, it went live on Wednesday, February 11th. And then Thursday, the next day, a guy had trouble sitting still for that night. The next day, I was just sort of pacing because at that point, people are telling me they've ordered it, but no one's gotten it yet. No one's read. It's like, oh, that's great, you're getting my book, but wow, I hope it was a worthwhile purchase for you.
Everybody can go out on Amazon right now and read a couple short chapters. There's a preview, and they'll read a little bit about the Marine Corps Marathon. They'll get a quick story of Mike Spindler in that 1971 JFK 50 miler. And it's probably like talking which of your kids you like better, but is there any part of the book that you just say, that part is sweet? That chapter really nailed it.
Yeah, man, I like a lot of it. And it's me, I really like a lot of it. There's some great chapters about the Cherry Blossom 10 miler in there. That's the crown jewel of the Mid-Atlantic, especially back then. And some Hagerstown guys won that. Those are special chapters. There's some Boston marathons in there. There's some great stories from the Boston Marathon, especially the Duel in the Sun year. There's some good stuff from that race. Bill Rogers is in this book. I interviewed him for the book. He became a rival. Terry Baker had some epic duels with him. Those are special. There's a lot of good stuff in there. It's sort of the rise of these guys, some of their great races. There's some good stuff in there from the Olympic trials over the years.
Did you learn anything about yourself in this whole process?
Well, I learned that I like doing it. It was a different style of writing. I learned that. Yeah, I learned that this is great. Like I enjoy really working on a big story. Newspaper writing, literally, it was really rare that I ever spent over like 3 hours working on a story, ever. It was like it's a factory. Even a feature story, you just don't spend a lot of time on it. You just have to move on, get to the next story.
Yeah. Is there anything left to tell in the Hagerstown story that you thought, if I ever go back to this, or how do you feel about this scope?
Yeah, I mean, you could always tell more. I tried to keep the book at a fast pace. And so it's not a Wikipedia entry. With all these folks, you get sort of the highlights, the best race and the best races, key moments. But all these guys, obviously, they're world class. They ran countless races, and I didn't touch on all of them. And I'm sure there are probably some stones I didn't unturn. And, I might be able to go back to that if I do.
Well, it's very exciting, as you mentioned, some of the big races, some of the world-class athletes cross paths with Hagerstown people. And then in your personal life, your son's having this great success. It's a good 2025, 2026 for you, Andy.
Yeah, it's been great so far. Yeah. Yeah, it really has. Yeah.
Congratulations. Bring the book up again so people can see that front picture and make sure they if they're watching this, it's Hagerstown versus the world. And there's a clock time. What's 47:55?
That's a 10-miler. That was the St. Patty's Day 10-miler in 1987. And that's Jeff Scuffins winning the race. He won $3,000 that day. It was a super elite field. Bill Rafe Snyder was 4 seconds back in second. You can see him off in the distance. Nice crowd. That was a huge win for Jeff Scuffins.
Yeah, cool. Well, congratulations, Andy. I think
Thank you.
We'll get this out there, and on the podcast bookshelf, I'll put it up there at the top, and we'll make sure people can easily one-click link and get a hold of this.
Thank you. This has been great. I've enjoyed talking about all this.
Yeah, well, say hi to Mike Spindler next time you talk to him, and maybe I'll get in touch with you to interview some of the people that are in the book that are still around who were 70s runners themselves.
I think that'd be great. That would be great.
It's been great spending time with you, Andy. Congratulations on this roaring success. 8 days in and moving right to number one. Everybody's got to get it. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.